Merseyside carries more than history. In the fog, in the tunnels, in the places no sunlight reaches, something still waits. Tonight, we follow the footsteps the city tried to forget. Knowsley Hall, on the quiet edge of Prescott, surrounded by sweeping parkland and centuries of autumn wind, stands Knowsley Hall, a Georgian masterpiece whose beauty cannot hide the shadows within. The great doors open onto corridors that seem to breathe history, yet the air carries something colder, something restless. For this estate seat of the powerful Stanley family has never forgotten its tragedies. The first of its lingering spirits is known only as the Ruined Lord. He belonged to the hall in the 1760s, a nobleman whose pride was both his armor and his downfall. Some say he lost his honor in a wager. Others whisper of a duel fought in secret beneath the trees. Whatever truth lies buried, his spirit remains bound to the gallery above the main hall. Visitors walking there alone speak of a steady rhythm, heavy boots striking polished wood, slow and deliberate, as though the unseen man still patrols the estate he once commanded. Now and then, a dark figure forms in the corner of the eye, tall, rigid shoulders tense with regret. A faint scent follows him, sharp and unmistakable. Old tobacco drifting through rooms where no one has smoked in decades. Colder still is the presence of the weeping maid. She was a young servant, barely grown, who succumbed to fever one winter long ago. Those who encounter her describe an instant plunge in temperature, a chill so deep it steals the breath. Soft, sorrowful sighs echo near the great fireplace, as though she stands there, warming hands she no longer has. Mirrors fog suddenly in her wake, their surfaces trembling, with a sadness no living voice can explain. Across the manor, the haunting deepens. Footsteps cross empty corridors. Doors open with no hand to move them. The grand dining room grows bitterly cold after dusk, its silence weighing heavily on the air. Even the parklands whisper with unease. Several guests have seen faint glowing eyes watching from the mist before vanishing into the trees. Knowsley Hall may stand proud beneath the daylight, but when evening falls and the wind curls around its stone walls, the past returns, walking, weeping, and watching. The shadows here do not sleep. Hanover Hotel, in the busy heart of Liverpool, where neon lights paint the night and footsteps echo along Hanover Street, stands a modest hotel whose walls have witnessed a tragedy far darker than its warm exterior suggests. To most, the Hanover Hotel is simply a place to rest after a day in the city. Yet for those who know its story, the building carries an unease that settles quietly into every corridor. Years ago, a woman was found dead in one of the rooms. She was meant to appear in court the very next day to give evidence against a police officer. Her death was ruled mysterious, but locals believe it was no accident. They whisper that the man responsible, a figure with a heavy mustache and a hard, furious stare, never truly left the premises. Staff have reported seeing him in brief, terrifying flashes. A tall shadow stands at the end of a hallway, shoulders squared, gaze fixed upon the living. He does not move. He only watches. And when anyone gathers the courage to approach, his shape dissolves into the dim light, leaving behind a tension that clings to the skin. Guests have spoken of being followed by an unseen presence, footsteps matching their pace along the upper floor. Doors vibrate softly as though brushed by an impatient hand. At times, muffled voices drift from empty rooms, low, angry murmurs like a quarrel continuing long after both participants have left this world. The atmosphere thickens most around the room where the woman died. Lights flicker when no storm troubles the city. Cold patches bloom across the carpet, and a feeling settles in the sense of standing in a place where injustice has taken root, where a story was cut short and now repeats itself endlessly. Some believe the woman's spirit lingers too, though far more softly than her killer's. A faint tapping on the glass, a whisper of movement, behind the curtains, as though she still tries to draw the world's attention to what happened that night. But her voice is quiet, and his is not. In the Hanover Hotel, the living check in the lights dim, and the story replays a silent struggle between a frightened witness and the man who silenced her. And down the corridor, his shadow still waits. Ye hole in ye wall, hidden within one of the oldest streets in Liverpool, down a narrow passage where the stone seems to drink in the dim light, stands Ye Hole in Ye Wall, the city's oldest public house. Its timber beams and low ceilings whisper of centuries past, when sailors, merchants, and wanderers drank away their fortunes beneath its wavering candlelight. Yet the stories that endure are not of ale or music, but of figures who return long after last orders have rung out. The most familiar presence is a shadowy man, said to be a Spaniard, slain here after resisting an attempt to press him into naval service. Those who have worked in the pub after dark speak of seeing a dark shape standing absolutely still in a corner of the bar, shoulders slightly hunched, coat heavy with imagined sea spray. He lingers silently, as though waiting for a ship that will never again reach shore. But there is another apparition, a ghost so convincing that even seasoned staff have mistaken him for a regular patron. He wears a long, waxed jacket, the kind favored by old mariners who braved brutal storms. He stands at the bar, his posture casual, as though ready to order a drink. When approached, he turns slightly, revealing no expression at all, and then simply fades, leaving only the faint scent of salt and damp rope behind. Stranger still are the disturbances that ripple through the pub. Elastic bands snap across the bar without human touch, stinging the air as though thrown by unseen fingers. Lights fuse suddenly, while workers stock the cellar, plunging them into a darkness so complete it feels deliberate. The sound of footsteps echoes on the stair to the cellar, followed by the unmistakable sensation of someone descending, yet no one emerges. At closing time, when the laughter has faded and only the creak of the old building remains, the atmosphere tightens. Something watches from the narrow staircase. Something moves just beyond the spill of lamplight. Some say these spirits cling to the pub, the way a sailor clings to his final harbor, unwilling to let go of the last place they felt entire. And in Ye Hole in Ye Wall, the dead appear to drink beside the living, returning night after night to the bar that remembers them. Ma Boyle's alehouse and eatery. Between the shadows of the Tower building and the shifting light of Liverpool's docks stands Ma Boyle's, a place where the tide of history feels close enough to touch. Once a snug coffee house, later a sailor's refuge, and now a warm alehouse tucked beneath towering stone. It carries an atmosphere that deepens when the sun sinks below the river. For all its cheer, by day, Ma Boyle's grows unsettlingly still, by night, as though something long forgotten stirs gently beneath its floors. Little is written about its hauntings, yet the stories whispered by staff and late-night patrons linger with a peculiar weight. Workers speak of footsteps pacing along the upper bar just after closing, slow but certain, as though someone is examining the quiet rooms with a familiarity born of another age. Chairs scrape across the wooden floor without any wind to push them, leaving marks that no one remembers making. Near the narrow staircase leading down toward the cellar, the air grows unexpectedly heavy. Those locking up have described a strange compulsion to look over their shoulder certain that someone stands just beyond their line of sight. A tall figure cast in dim amber light, never forming fully, never fading entirely. Sometimes the feeling is accompanied by a faint scent, like old brass, warmed by candle flame. Glasses tremble lightly along the shelves as if tapped by invisible knuckles, responding to a rhythm only the unseen can hear. More than one staff member has returned in the morning to find cutlery gathered into odd, deliberate arrangements, patterns too precise to be chance, yet too subtle to resemble any human hand. It is the silence, however, that unsettles most. When Marboyle's shutters close and the heart of Liverpool roars far below, a hush settles over the alehouse, the kind of hush found in places that once held deep emotion or grief or longing. Some say the building remembers those who passed through its doors, the solitary sailors who waited for ships that never came back, the widows who watched the river for any sign of return, the quiet souls who sat alone in the corner with stories they never lived long enough to tell. And so, Marboyle's remains a place where even the dimmest light feels watched, where the night breathes softly through the old brick, and where the past leans close, listening still. The Black E, on the rise of Great George Street beneath the great dome that crowns the Black E, lies a building whose purpose has shifted through generations, from chapel to community hall to a place of art and gathering. Yet beneath its bright murals and restless creativity there lingers a softness in the shadows, a sense that the walls have absorbed far more than music and laughter. Something older moves quietly through the spaces where children now play and dancers rehearse. The reports begin in the lower levels beneath the dome. There, in the tiled corridors near the old toilets, witnesses speak of strange white shapes drifting gently out of the dark. Not lights, not reflections, perfect spheres, each about a foot across, gliding through the air with a calm authority, as though following paths worn long before the building's modern purpose. They drift for a moment, shimmer faintly, and dissolve into nothing. Cold blasts of air follow these apparitions, sudden and sharp, striking the skin with a chill that feels purposeful rather than natural. The temperature drops so quickly that breath forms in the air even on mild evenings. Some say it feels like standing in a doorway between this world and another, a threshold that no one can see, yet everyone senses. Staff working after dusk describe the same unsettling pattern. A quiet buzz of activity settles into silence. Footsteps begin to echo, far above, circling the upper balcony, even when the building has been locked for hours. Doors that were latched securely swing open with slow, measured confidence. The dome itself creaks in long, aching tones, as though acknowledging the presence of someone unseen walking beneath it. In one account, a volunteer paused on the staircase after hearing a soft knock behind her. She turned, expecting a child, but found the corridor empty. As she stepped forward again, the knocking continued, 3 measured taps, as though someone was trying to make themselves known from the other side of the wall. The Black E is vibrant by day, full of life and movement. But its nights belong to quieter presences, drifting spheres of pale light, colder than winter breezes, and footsteps that cross the cavernous hall long after human voices have faded. Here, the past has not departed, it simply waits patient and watchful beneath the great dome. Huskisson Monument, St. James Cemetery. Beneath the towering presence of Liverpool Cathedral, where the stone walls rise like cliffs against the shifting sky, lies St. James's Cemetery, a hollowed quarry turned resting place, its paths winding through shadows thick with memory. Among the monuments scattered across this sunken garden of the dead stands one that holds a deeper sorrow than most the Huskisson Monument. William Huskisson, the statesman whose life ended in tragedy, became the world's first railway victim when Stephenson's rocket struck him during its historic trial run. His death shook the nation, and some say left an imprint so powerful that the echoes have never faded. Those who walk the cemetery after dusk report hearing footsteps inside the monument itself, slow, deliberate pacing, as though someone trapped within stone continues to walk the final restless minutes of his life. The steps do not falter, they do not hurry, they travel back and forth in a mournful rhythm, repeating a journey that ended violently on the tracks. At times, the figure has been seen too. A pale shape moving near the memorial coat, hanging heavily posture bent, as if burdened by the knowledge of his fate. He appears for only a second long enough for recognition, too brief for certainty. The air around him thickens, carrying with it the faint scent of damp iron, like cold steel freshly struck. Along the nearby path, witnesses speak of white figures darting low across the gravel, swift and silent. They flicker like torn pieces of fog, shifting between gravestones before melting into darkness. No one knows what they represent: echoes of railway workers, fragments of mourning crowds, or something older that claimed the site long before trains carved their path into history. Visitors often describe an overwhelming heaviness when approaching the monument, a sense of walking into a place that remembers pain. Even the birds avoid perching there, circling wide above the stonework before settling elsewhere in the cemetery. By daylight, the monument is a piece of history, but when night gathers beneath the cathedral's towering shadow, it becomes something more, a place where tragedy bleeds through the veil, where footsteps continue for those who can no longer walk, and where St. James's Cemetery whispers its oldest grief. Sefton Park Iron Bridge, in the heart of Sefton Park, where sweeping avenues of winter trees bend over quiet paths, stands the Iron Bridge, a relic of the Victorian age, graceful in daylight, yet strangely mournful when the dusk settles in. Couples stroll past it in the evening, unaware that the bridge itself is a monument to one of Liverpool's most enduring tragedies, a love story that reached across life and death only to collapse in silence. The tale begins with two young lovers, Oliver and Catherine. Their families disapproved of their courtship, insisting that each look elsewhere for a more suitable match. But the pair clung to hope with the fierce devotion of youth. They agreed to meet upon the Iron Bridge, a promise whispered beneath the lantern glow of a February evening. There, on the 14th day of the month, they would flee together and leave behind a world determined to keep them apart. Oliver arrived first breath frosting in the winter air. He waited watching the path for the light step of his beloved. Minutes passed, then an hour. The air grew colder. The park fell into a hush. Just as despair began to settle upon him, he saw her Catherine standing at the far end of the bridge, pale and still beneath the iron arch. Relief washed over him as he ran forward, arms outstretched. But when he reached her, his hands touched nothing but night air. The figure dissolved like frost beneath the rising sun. Only later did he learn the truth. Catherine had succumbed to cholera the previous night. Her final words, reportedly, were a desperate plea, whispered through fevered breath, "I must meet my love on the Iron Bridge." Since then, the bridge has carried more than footsteps. Witnesses on cold February nights have seen the pair reunited in spectral form, a young woman appearing at the far end, her dress stirring without wind, and a young man stepping toward her with a longing that time cannot erase. They meet for a moment, then fade, leaving nothing but a shiver on the still air. Sefton Park moves gently around them, swans gliding leaves, falling lovers walking hand in hand, but the iron bridge keeps its vigil year after year, holding the echo of a promise that death itself could not silence. Stanley Park Lodge. On the quiet edge of Stanley Park, where fog settles low on winter mornings and the trees whisper against the tiled roof, sits the old Park Lodge, a building outwardly ordinary, yet known by those who once lived there as one of the strangest and most troubled houses in Merseyside. Its windows look out upon playgrounds and open fields, but its rooms hold stories far darker, woven from fear-wonder, and something that felt almost alive. The first incident came as a shock, even to the unshakable. A sound tore through the hall one night, not human, not animal, but something caught between a howl, a moan, and a scream. It climbed the staircase, rattling the doors, pressing against the walls with a force that felt hungry. Those inside froze where they stood, for the noise carried not just volume, but intention. Soon after came the figure of the woman on the landing, gliding out from the shadows. She walked calmly across the upper floor before drifting straight through a solid wall, leaving behind a coldness that lingered for hours. A child of the family, startled awake later, insisted that this woman used to sit at the foot of his bed and tell stories, soft, soothing tales, from a voice that no longer belonged to the living. Other visions arrived with unsettling persistence. A mural on the wall, a simple painted scene, seemed to stir and shift. One evening, its figures, stepping in a delicate dance no brush had ever captured. Two spectral children appeared to the youngest boy, tossing a toy rabbit between them. When the rabbit bounced toward the fireplace, the living child tried to retrieve it, but the ghostly pair screamed in terror, and another woman, pale as plaster, turned sharply to scold them. As the family watched in horror, the fireplace stood cold, boarded, unused for decades. Some speak of an old man, gentle but watchful, wandering the rooms as though still checking on the youngest members of the household. Others describe birds falling suddenly silent near the lodge, their calls replaced by whispers that skim across the windows at dusk. Today, the building is used by council staff who politely refuse to comment on what lingers there. But Stanley Park Lodge remains a place where walls breathe, paintings watch, and the boundary between imagination and haunting grows impossibly thin. Old Speak Airport Control Tower. On the edge of Liverpool's old airfield, where grass now rises through the cracked runways and the wind sighs through abandoned hangars, stands the derelict control tower of Speak Airport. Its windows stare out toward a sky that once roared with engines. Now it keeps its vigil in silence, a silence broken only by the faint echo of tragedies that never fully left the air. Among the spirits said to wander here, none is more spoken of than the one they call Captain Black. He was a pilot in the golden age of daring long-distance flights, preparing for a race to South Africa. Fate intervened during routine maneuvers when a landing aircraft collided with his own. The propeller sliced through the cockpit, ending his life in a violent instant that left shockwaves across the airfield. Yet, for some reason, Captain Black did not depart. Workers maintaining the remaining buildings report seeing a tall, dark figure standing at the control room windows, unmoving, silhouetted against the fading sky. At times, he appears on the stairwell, his uniform crisp, his posture impeccable, his presence heavy, with unspoken purpose. Those who attempt to confront the figure find only an empty corridor, though the air feels charged, almost electric, as if a storm were gathering indoors. Stranger still are the mechanical disturbances. On one memorable night, long after the airport ceased public operation, the lift was summoned to the sealed-off basement. The metal gate slammed open with such force that it echoed across the entire tower though not a single soul was inside. The basement had been locked for years. Engineers working late have heard the unmistakable drone of aircraft engines overhead, though no planes fly this part of Merseyside anymore. A shadow glides across the tarmac, where nothing passes. Dogs refuse to approach the hangars, growling at corners of darkness that hold no human form. Some claim Captain Black replays the final moments of his flight, checking instruments, waiting for clearance, ready for a departure destined never to arrive. Others believe he now guards the site, bound to the tower by the abruptness of his death, unwilling to leave the sky he once commanded. As night settles over Speak, the old airport grows still, and somewhere inside the tower, a pilot continues to wait for a takeoff that will never come. Royal Court Theatre. In the heart of Liverpool, beneath the glow of street lamps and the hum of night traffic, stands the Royal Court Theatre, a grand old building where generations have gathered for laughter, music, and spectacle. Yet behind the velvet curtains and polished brass fixtures lies a quieter story, one shaped not by applause, but by the lingering presence of those who never took their final bow. The most familiar spirit here is Les Joinson, the janitor, known fondly as Old Les. He worked tirelessly in the theatre, tending to the backstage corridors and cramped rooms that few audience members ever see. One winter day, while repairing the roof amid an icy wind, he slipped, broke his leg, and succumbed to the cold before help could reach him. Though his body was laid to rest, his devotion to the theatre appears unbroken. Even today, doors to his old office open and close of their own accord as though he continues his rounds. Staff speak lightly of him, blaming misplaced tools or flickering lights on Old Les, yet their smiles grow tighter when asked if they truly believe he has gone. His cat Napoleon, once the theatre's unofficial guardian, is said to roam the building as well. Workers have encountered the unmistakable scent of the animal, a dusty, warm smell, just before a door swings open without human touch. Some even claim the door will respond to a soft command, as though someone or something still obeys. But the theatre holds older spirits too. In the 70s, two stagehands working high above the stage watched in stunned silence as a man dressed as a cavalier strode through the upper walkway. His boots made no sound. He walked straight through a wall, turned his head toward them in a slow, deliberate motion, and vanished as though swallowed by the stone. In 2006, after a burglar alarm sounded, the theatre manager arrived to find the lift sitting on the 4th floor. It had been powerless for hours, and in a more recent account, a wardrobe mistress filming backstage reviewed her footage, only to hear a voice behind her whisper her name, though the recording showed her standing quite alone. At the Royal Court, the stage lights may dim, but the shadows never leave. Here, every performance has an unseen audience. Flaybrick Hill Cemetery. On the slopes above Birkenhead, where leaning headstones gather in half circles and ivy winds through wrought iron gates, lies Flaybrick Hill Cemetery, a place that seems to hold its breath even in daylight. Shadows drift differently here, sinking between mausoleums carved with angels whose faces have worn smooth with time. But among all the whispering graves and fading epitaphs, it is one spirit alone that chills even the bravest visitor. They call her the Clown of Flaybrick. Her story began in the 1920s, during the funeral of Charles Fry, an airman whose burial was delayed by a grave-digging mistake. As frustration and grief grew among the mourners, a strange figure appeared, a woman dressed as a clown, white costume glowing pale against the cemetery gloom. She mocked the grieving entourage with wild laughter, weaving between the graves with impossible speed. When approached, She vanished only to reappear moments later at the far end of the path, hurling flowers torn from funeral wreaths with furious strength. Decades later, an elderly groundskeeper confirmed she was the ghost of a female clown buried years earlier, though the reason for her rage has long since dissolved into silence. But her presence is far from harmless. In 1995, a teenage girl, walking past the clown's grave, was attacked by an unseen force. Fingers closed around her throat. She was shaken violently as a voice hissed, "Get away from my grave." Her screams brought help, but no attacker was found. The following year, reporters investigating the legend witnessed the clown's figure crouched atop a 6-foot wall before leaping down in a single unnatural motion, disappearing into the shadows without sound. Even seasoned investigators left the grounds pale and shaken. Some nights, witnesses hear faint, eerie music drifting across the cemetery, a ukulele played slowly in the dark. The melody bends strangely, like something half-remembered, half-forgotten. On rare occasions, the clown herself appears at the edge of lantern light, face stark white head, tilted watching the living with cold amusement, before dissolving into the dark. Flaybrick is beautiful in its own way, moss stone quiet. But when the clown wanders between the graves, beauty gives way to dread. Here, even the dead fear her presence. Before the darkness settles, a quiet invitation. Creepy Experience has opened its membership tiers for those who wish to journey deeper. VIP 1 offers badges, haunting emojis, and priority replies. VIP 2 grants all that, plus members-only polls to decide future investigations. If you feel the pull of the unknown, join us. Stand with the circle that listens for every whisper in the dark.